The one thing that I found that holds us back the most, in the most practical sense, is just not having enough clarity. Not knowing what we're going to do, not knowing what our next move is. That's really the only reason why we don't do something. And so, because we're not sure, we spend, we have other things that are right there, ready to jump at us to take our attention, like your phone, because it's not comfortable to sit there and to actually think about what you have to do. And so what our mind reverts to, it says, hey, I'm not getting enough dopamine here. So you literally have to go to your phone and start scrolling because you don't even have control over that. Your mind literally has that on autopilot. So how do you combat this, right? You have to be really aware and really uh, and observe what's going on, right? Because procrastination, right? How do we stop that? Well, if you knew exactly what to do every step of the way for what you were gonna do, then you wouldn't really procrastinate. You would sit down and do it, right? Um, if you didn't know exactly how you were gonna do something, doesn't it always happen that you sit down and you're like, well, let me watch a YouTube video real quick on it just so I get a little more clarity. And then, but you never really get that clarity because the experience is a whole nother different type of learning lesson compared to you watching a video or even reading about it. So, clarity is really the answer. And how do we find clarity? The only way to find clarity is through action. And then we get more clear, and then we are more motivated to take more action. It's like this. You're either spiraling up or you're spiraling down. It's a cycle that moves in the trend that you decide to move in, right? So it's a trend that moves in the direction that you decide to move in. So if you're in an upward spiraling cycle where you're constantly taking action, your clarity starts becoming more and more fine, and you start creating a really, really high resolution picture of the things you need to do. And most of the gaps are being filled, right? And it's only those minute things that once you actually start becoming an expert in, you start identifying the things you don't know and you know exactly the right questions to ask. So that's the point of mastery, because you know exactly what questions to ask to find the answers that you need, because you basically know all the terminology, you know the process in which it happens, and how to obtain the result that you want out of the thing you're doing. But on the other hand, if you're not taking action and you're looking for other things to give you that clarity, then because you're not taking action, you actually start getting very distracted. And there's so much information out there. There's so much of an abundance of information that you can lose clarity like that by one YouTube binge, because you start saying, oh my God, everyone just gave me like a different advice on the same thing that I'm looking for. So, what the hell do I do? And now you're even less clear on what the hell to do. That's the issue in living in today's age. We have a blessing, but we also have like the Death Star right there, because we can learn anything, but it doesn't really help us to execute on anything. Because if you go into how our brain works and think about how the physiology works inside our brain, the brain is always looking for the easiest path to survival. And by you beginning to take action, that process in the beginning, your brain doesn't like it. and it's a matter of dopamine, right? And so, for example, your brain says, "Oh, you're getting more dopamine from watching YouTube videos, so let's keep doing that because I like that." Versus the dopamine that you get when you start a task you're unclear about doing, it's very uncomfortable. Your brain gets no reward from it. There's no dopamine release. But let's say you continue moving through that discomfort, the dopamine release of actually accomplishing the task and checking it off your notebook or your whiteboard, that releases dopamine. And you start getting addicted to that because that's a strong form of dopamine. Because you have to work for it. And your brain says, whoa, that was cool, right? And so slowly you can start to shift, right, where your brain's dopamine's coming from. And that's why they talk about these dopamine fasts, right? Because some of us are just so fucking addicted to this thing, including me. It's insane, right? And we have to be really aware of what's happening. And if you understand what the brain is actually doing, right? The brain just wants to keep you alive. And so anything it finds uncomfortable, it's more than likely, if your brain finds something uncomfortable, then that's saying, hey, I don't like this. This is probably not going to keep us alive. Why don't we come back to our comfort zone, right? Keep getting this dopamine, because you see, the reason dopamine is so important, it kept us alive back then. That's where our food came from, right? Every time we got food, boom. Every time we had sex, boom, dopamine, right? But now we have an abundance of food. We have an abundance of sex, you know? So we have to understand where we want this dopamine to come from. There's a reason why we're wired this way. We're wired this way for survival. But today's day and age, the survival problem has been fixed by human civilization. So the problem now is actually finding meaning and finding clarity for each individual human to live a purposeful life in this world. And I think the only way is to just take action, take that one small step into the unknown and find something out. Find out something. And repeat the cycle over and over. And you start filling in the gaps, and you're going to get addicted to that process, whatever that is. I think that's a great way to put it. And as you start filling the gaps in, you start to recognize the things that are missing, and then you know what questions to ask. And when you start to know what questions to ask, that's when momentum starts, because you understand, you see most of the picture, you see the map, you know how to communicate. And that's why questions are so important, because if you ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answers. You start asking the right questions, that points you in the right direction. It's so much more about the questions and the quality of questions that we ask. And the only way to ask better questions is to go into the unknown, find something out, fill a gap in, and then repeat the process. And ask a better question. I think that's the key. That's the unlock. Ask better questions. And how do we do that? We take incremental steps towards what we want, incremental steps into the unknown, find something out, and ask a better question, and repeat that process. It's really that simple. It's really that simple, I think. Fuck yeah. Aha, baby. Let's go. Let's get after it. Fuck yeah. Love you guys. All right. Give this thumbs up and a like and a love and a click and a subscribe. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Love you guys.